On the afternoon of April 19th, 1991, in Bristol Township, Pennsylvania, 12-year-old David Hibbs stepped off his school bus with excitement. Clutched in his hand was his honor roll certificate, something he could not wait to share with his mother, Joy Hibbs. But as he approached the back of his house, his excitement quickly turned into fear. Thick black smoke was pouring from the rear door. His mother was nowhere in sight. David immediately ran to a neighbor's home, shouting for help. After alerting them, he turned back toward the house, desperate to reach his mother. But before he could go inside, a neighbor physically held him back. David resisted, kicking and struggling, unwilling to accept that he could not help her. Firefighters soon arrived at the scene. As emergency crews worked to contain the flames, David was placed in the back of an ambulance, separated from the chaos unfolding just feet away. Inside the smoke-filled home, responders made a devastating discovery. The body of 35-year-old Joy Hibbs, found in her son's bedroom. Initially, investigators believed Joy had died in the fire, but that changed quickly. The medical examiner's findings revealed a far more disturbing truth. Joy had not died from smoke inhalation or burns. She had been stabbed 5 times. Her rib cage had been crushed. Evidence of strangulation was also present. These brutal injuries indicated that she had been murdered before the fire started. Authorities concluded the fire had been intentionally set to conceal the crime. What began as a presumed accidental blaze was now an active homicide investigation. The scene left more questions than answers, and the quiet neighborhood of Bristol Township was shaken by the horrifying discovery of a mother's violent death. Before tragedy struck, Joy and Charlie Hibbs lived a peaceful, family-centered life. They met as high school sweethearts in Florida, quickly forming a bond that led to marriage soon after graduation. Together, they built a life rooted in love and stability. Eventually, they settled in Bristol Township, Pennsylvania, where they raised their 2 children, Angie and David. Charlie worked in construction, providing for the family, while Joy pursued a career as a medical assistant. At home, she was a devoted mother, engaged, nurturing, and deeply involved in her children's lives. Their home was filled with warmth and laughter, much of it preserved in family home videos taken by Charlie over the years. The couple's love for one another was evident. Their daughter Angie recalled how clearly they loved each other. It was something visible, not just in gestures or routines, but in the way they interacted and supported one another. David, too, held strong memories of his parents sharing activities. They both enjoyed fishing, spending time outdoors, and riding motorcycles, Joy riding on the back with Charlie at the wheel. This section highlights a family rooted in connection and shared joy. The Hibbs home was not marked by conflict or chaos, but by stability, routine, and affection. Understanding who Joy was, an attentive mother, a loving wife, and a kind-hearted woman, provides important emotional context. It reinforces the devastating weight of her loss and what her family endured in the aftermath of her violent death. April 19th, 1991, began like any other day for the Hibbs family in Bristol Township, Pennsylvania. That morning, Joy Hibbs spent time with her 12-year-old son David and the family's new puppy. It was a simple, quiet start filled with the small joys of daily life. After enjoying the morning together, Joy sent David and her 16-year-old daughter Angie off to school. Once her children had left, Joy continued with her daily routine. She made a trip to the bank to withdraw cash, followed by grocery shopping. By approximately 11 a.m., she had returned home. Around that same time, a pastor and his assistant from a local Baptist church arrived to speak with Joy. Their visit was brief and uneventful. They left the house by 11:45 a.m. Both individuals later provided verifiable alibis that accounted for their whereabouts following their visit, and they were not considered suspects. One of the most crucial pieces of physical evidence came from David's bedroom. During the fire, a clock in the room stopped working. Frozen at exactly 12:54 p.m., investigators concluded that the fire had reached that part of the house around that time. Based on this, they determined that Joy had likely been murdered in the narrow 1-hour window between 11:50 a.m. and 12:50 p.m. There were no signs of forced entry, suggesting Joy may have known her killer or willingly opened the door. Her wallet, however, was found empty in the living room. raising the possibility of robbery as a motive. Additionally, a witness reported seeing a blue Chevrolet Monte Carlo parked outside the Hibbs home, facing the wrong direction, sometime around the estimated time of the crime. These details formed the initial foundation of the investigation, offering early clues and setting the framework for what would become a decades-long search for answers. In the months leading up to Joy Hibbs' death, the family experienced several disturbing incidents that disrupted their sense of safety. Someone threw a brick through one of their windows. On another occasion, Joy's car tires were slashed. The back door of their house was also kicked in. These acts of vandalism were not random. They appeared targeted and deliberate, leaving Joy anxious and increasingly fearful. When investigators questioned 12-year-old David Hibbs about who might have had a reason to harm his mother, one name came to mind: Robert Atkins. Robert had been a former neighbor, living just a few houses away from the Hibbs residence. He was known in the neighborhood as a small-time drug dealer, and David remembered him for his explosive temper. It was the kind of temper that could be heard from the Atkins home all the way down the street. Robert's wife, April, had formed a friendship with Joy and frequently visited with her child. Despite this outward friendliness, tensions eventually surfaced. Just weeks before Joy's death, she had a heated phone call with Robert. She and Charlie had purchased marijuana from him, but were unhappy with the quality. Joy called to return it. During that call, which David overheard, Robert became enraged and issued threats. Although Robert and April had moved about 8 miles away by the time of the murder, Robert's volatile behavior, the recent argument, and his potential motive made him a person of interest. He drove a black Monte Carlo, not the blue one seen near the Hibbs house, but the match in make and model was notable. Robert claimed he had been at home and later left for a vacation in the Poconos. Despite these red flags, authorities dismissed him early in the investigation. This decision, based on limited distinctions and unverified assumptions, marked a significant misstep in the early handling of the case and allowed a potentially critical lead to go unexplored. In the absence of strong leads, investigators turned their attention to someone close to the victim, Charlie Hibbs, Joy's husband. On the day of Joy's murder, Charlie had been working in Philadelphia, approximately 20 miles from their Bristol Township home. He was on a construction site, surrounded by co-workers who could vouch for his presence throughout the day. Despite having a verifiable alibi, Charlie willingly cooperated with law enforcement. He participated in multiple police interviews and agreed to take 3 polygraph tests. Still, suspicion lingered. With no arrests made and no clear evidence pointing elsewhere, investigators began to treat Charlie as their primary suspect. This shift in focus had lasting consequences. For years, Charlie lived under the weight of unproven allegations, casting a long shadow over his life and his family. Friends and neighbors grew distant. Internally, the family struggled to make sense of the ongoing scrutiny directed at a man they believed to be innocent. The lack of progress in the case was deeply frustrating. David Hibbs, now older, voiced his frustration publicly. In an interview with the Huffington Post, he accused police of mishandling the investigation and failing to pursue critical leads. The impact of being miscast in a role he did not play left Charlie emotionally drained and socially isolated. This section underscores how investigative missteps and tunnel vision can prolong suffering for victims' families. By placing undue focus on Charlie, authorities may have missed opportunities to pursue more viable leads, delaying justice and compounding the grief of an already devastated family. The emotional toll on the Hibbs family was profound, and the case remained cold for more than 2 decades until a new investigator brought fresh eyes to the evidence. In 2014, over 2 decades after the murder of Joy Hibbs, Sergeant Mike Slaughter was assigned to the cold case. From the outset, Slaughter approached the investigation with fresh eyes and a commitment to re-examining every piece of available evidence. What he uncovered early on was troubling. Several original detectives were unwilling to discuss the case. Even more alarming, Slaughter learned that investigators had been directed to avoid pursuing Robert Atkins as a suspect because he had been working as a police drug informant at the time of the murder. Slaughter began with a thorough review of the case. He found no credible evidence implicating Charlie Hibbs and formally cleared him as a suspect. Then, he turned his attention back to Robert Atkins. As he retraced the original investigation, he noticed discrepancies in Robert's alibi. Robert claimed he had answered a phone call at home on the day of the murder before leaving for a family trip to the Poconos. However, the caller believed the conversation may have occurred as late as 1:30 p.m., after the estimated time of the crime. Slaughter also discovered that Robert had access to a blue Monte Carlo owned by his grandmother, which aligned with the vehicle seen near the Hibbs home on the day of the murder. The critical breakthrough came in 2016. April Atkins, now divorced from Robert, came forward and revealed that Robert had returned home on the day of the murder covered in blood. She recalled him saying, "I stabbed somebody and lit a house on fire." April explained that fear and years of abuse had kept her silent. This new testimony transformed the case. Slaughter's efforts revealed not only fresh leads, but also systemic issues in the original investigation, where protecting an informant had seemingly taken precedence over solving a murder. It was the beginning of long-delayed progress toward justice for Joy Hibbs. In May 2022, more than 30 years after the brutal murder of Joy Hibbs, Robert Atkins was indicted by a grand jury on charges of first-degree murder, arson, and robbery. The arrest marked a dramatic turn in a case that had remained unresolved for decades. What had once been a cold case clouded by missteps and missed opportunities was finally moving toward resolution. Robert elected to waive a jury trial in favor of a bench trial, which began in 2024. Prosecutors presented their case built on a combination of circumstantial evidence and powerful testimony. They argued that Robert had killed Joy following a dispute over a $20 marijuana transaction, then set the fire in a deliberate attempt to destroy evidence of the crime. The prosecution relied heavily on April Atkins' account, her chilling recollection of Robert coming home covered in blood and confessing to the stabbing and arson. The timeline also supported the case. The window of time between the church visit and the fire's ignition matched Robert's unaccounted movements. Additionally, the revelation that he had access to a blue Monte Carlo, similar to the one seen near the Hibbs home, further reinforced the state's argument. Ultimately, the judge found Robert Atkins guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Joy Hibbs, along with an additional 30 years for setting the fire. For the Hibbs family, the verdict brought long-awaited closure to a decades-long nightmare. There's still a big hole in my heart, but I felt justice for Joy. Finally, Charlie Hibbs said after the trial, his words reflected the emotional weight of a case that had haunted his family for over 3 decades, and the relief that truth and persistence had finally prevailed.